Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Angelica here. If you're new, come in, have a seat, have several seats, and if you're not new, thank you for having me once again all up on your screen. This video is about how to get A star or an A in history. I've been asked this many times, so it seems like history really be putting you guys through something, huh? So I'm going to discuss history. By the way, I've made this video about 4 times. That's 4 separate times I filmed and edited this same video. So yeah, it's a bit of a shambles right now. If you're watching this, then you know that this made the cut. History has been a really weird subject. For as long as I did history, it was a very weird subject. As in, like GCSEs, I got an A in history. I'm so mad about that, by the way, because I really deserved an A star. But my teacher gave me a B in my coursework, and it's funny because I won the award for being the student of the year for my hard work in history. So like, was I good or was I not? Which one? Because you weren't trying to help me get those grades, but at the same time you were giving me awards. So like, was I good or was I not? I really need to understand this. And then obviously you guys know that I was predicted an E for history A level. I thought that was just pure wickedness because they knew I wasn't going to get an E, but I didn't expect to get an A star in history. So like, how? Like, who, what, where? Like, who, how? I'm going to need someone to explain that. But because I got an A star, I think I can give some type of advice on how to get an A star and an A, because I can recall some things I did. So yeah, I hope this helps you in some sort of way.
Where is my notes? Where is my notes? Okay, so we done lost our notes, and I really just lost my notes. Like, what?
So first things first, I'm going to discuss general tips. You need a structure. You need a consistent structure to get an A star or an A in history. You need a balanced argument. So this doesn't mean you need to have 2 arguments for, 2 arguments against, 3 arguments for, 3 arguments against. You could literally have 1 argument for, 2 arguments against. You could have 3 arguments for, 2 arguments against. You could have 4 arguments for, 2 arguments against. You literally can do whatever you want as long as you acknowledge that there's a second opinion, there's an alternative argument, and some people might disagree with you. If you want an A star and A in history, you need to reach a judgment. A judgment, like, if there's one thing you take from this video, judgment. Judgment. Reach a judgment. And this is not just reaching a conclusion. No. So you start off in your introduction. Essentially, how I used to start off was say, it is debatable whether XYZ happened, or whether this is true, whether the USA was to blame for the Cold War, something along those lines. Sometimes you might not be able to use that same line in the same way, but for most questions you can. Then I would essentially define the terms in the question. If you're talking about a particular period, I'd speak about the period. Then I would give like couple of lines basically stating what people have said so far about the question, what some historians think and what other historians think. And then I would always say this: in order to reach a reasonable judgment on whether XYZ is true, we must consider A, B, C. I always did this. I never used to do this at the beginning because my teacher would tell me just to say it is debatable, but then I realized that itself was like not really saying much. You kind of need to explain what you're gonna make your judgment on in your introduction. I always made mini conclusions after every point I made. So in every paragraph I made a mini conclusion and I linked it back to the question. Most people have been taught to do PEE, which is point, evidence, explain, but I take it a step further and I do PEER, point, evidence, explain, refer back to the question. In all my exams, I always planned my essays. This is really important. I don't think I've ever been the kind of person to walk into an exam and just start writing. Next thing I did was I always used lots of evidence. So of course some of us have been told to do PEE, but it doesn't have to be like standalone evidence. You can make a point and explain that point and use that and explain that point with another type of evidence, if I'm making sense. Like, evidence isn't just like one block of text that you put in the middle of your paragraph. Wherever possible, I used as much evidence as I could. In one paragraph, I could have 4 different sets of evidence. It was never standardized. Like, it just depended on the question itself. Like, might seem really obvious, but you need to answer the question. It goes back again to judgment. You really need to read the question and highlight what is important in the question. Do this ceremonially. Do this every time you're writing an essay for a question. And if you plan, then this becomes second nature to you. Some questions might say explain. Some questions might say to what extent is XYZ true. Some questions might ask you who is at fault. And so you need to be mindful of the wording that's been used in the question. And also, some questions, I nearly got caught by this, some questions will ask you about a specific period in time. And so if you are if you just read the question and you start answering, you might miss the fact that it only wants you to discuss a specific historical time. And so you might be using evidence from before that time. And so you might be writing a good answer, but it's not relevant because we didn't ask you for 1918, we asked you for 1920 to 1923. Do you know? So it's important for you to look at the question, actually answer it. I beg you. Like, it sounds so dumb, but you don't know how many people don't answer the question in the exams, and you don't want to be that person. I almost essentially conclude in my introduction without concluding. I explain what I'm going to need to conclude, and so from the body of my essay you can kind of tell where I'm going to be going. And then in my conclusion, I explained essentially how I reached that judgment, but from the mini conclusions, it will be very obvious where I'm going by the end of the essay. You start strong, you finish strong. Essentially, my teachers used to tell me that they could tell what grade an essay was going to be from the introduction. So this shows that there is some type of correlation between starting strong and ending strong, because you need to be consistent in your essay, because you might have there's no point having a really long essay that isn't amazing. You know, there's no point having a really long essay if you're not consistent through the essay. You might as well just write a short essay that is really good than to have a very long essay that is average, because you can get A stars even with short essays. You can actually do really well, and it's better for you to do well in what you really know about than to add an extra paragraph and then it goes way left and now we can't give you that A star because overall your essay isn't, you know, A star material. This is the fun part of history, in my opinion, the evaluating of sources and evidence. So if you're doing source papers, I don't know if these still exist, but evaluating your sources is highly crucial. But I went beyond this, and I always evaluated my evidence wherever applicable in my essays. You can evaluate a source by essentially considering the origin of the source, considering the nature of the source, considering its purpose, and considering its audience. Let's say you use evidence from a newspaper that is known to be quite satirical. This is going to obviously be important for your argument, because you might consider the fact that this source that you use is for a certain audience, and therefore it might not be as credible. It's for a certain purpose, it's of a certain nature. So if you can evaluate sources, this will boost your mark in your history essay significantly. I went a step further as to get opinions of historians for the topics I was discussing. So I'd always quote historians wherever possible. I'd quote things that have been asserted by scholarly individuals about certain topics. And then I would, again, I told you guys I always evaluated my evidence. I would, simple words like saying Marxist historian or saying liberal historian, it actually is a critical way of like looking at your evidence, because it shows that you acknowledge that their views might actually influence whatever they've said about that topic. So these are like little things that you can do to make you stand out and to show that you are critically looking at your evidence. Always, always, always cross-reference in your essays. Always cross-reference between paragraphs, cross-reference between your evidence, cross-reference between your own opinion. I always cross-reference in paragraphs. You can do this by using words like echoing, contrastingly. As previously noted, there are various words that you can use, and maybe I might make a part 2 video actually showing you guys what a model essay sounds like, so you guys can understand. There are so many ways you can cross-reference to show that you're thinking about the bigger picture and you're considering certain principles or certain ideas that are similar between various sources. So the last thing I can advise you on that I did in my essays was discuss the question within its historical context. So I would always consider whether let's say like a massacre happened. I would consider why I think that event happened, or why that scandal, or why whatever took place occurred in that period of time, and I would compare it with anything similar going on in today's society. In some ways you might not be able to do that all the time, but depending on your topics you can actually essentially consider like the question within its time. Like, consider the fact that like history is all about like historical periods, all about learning from the past. And so if you can show like you're thinking about the bigger picture, thinking about the context of whatever you're learning about, and you might be able to find a similarity between what's going on today and any lessons that you can take from that, then I think that is A-star thought. But it has to be executed in a clever way. You can't just start speaking about something that the question is not asking you about, because you might be making a good point, but if it's not relevant to the question, then you know, like, that would even make you look probably really confused, even though you know what you're trying to do. So those are my tips on how to get an A-star or an A in history. Obviously there are some basic things like, you know, spelling, punctuation, grammar. I'll have more of these type of videos. Thank you so much again for watching this video. Don't forget to connect with me on my social media channel and leave any comments you have in the comment section. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!